क्लासी फैमिली फ्रंट पर। उम्मीद है सब लोग ठीक ही होंगे। शुरू करिए।
Yes, sir. With your blessing, sir. So, now it is time to start. Today, I am, I am happy to have with us Professor Ashok Kumar Tarai, sir, and at the same time, I feel the absence of Dr. Samarana, sir, and Dr. K.M. Narayana Rao, sir. Of course, Rao, sir, will join late. So, in Indian philosophy, as we all belong to Indian culture, we can manage with both absence and presence, bhava and abhava. This is the mindset of Indian people. So with this we shall start our session. Actually, introducing the guest is an art, and I am very poor in this field. Dr. Samarana generally introduces the guests in a very good manner, and I failed to do that. Today's speaker is a philosopher, uh, so far as my knowledge goes. He is a creative thinker. He is a very good resource person, and he is very committed to philosophical discussion, philosophical writings. Whenever he writes any article. He takes time and very meticulously he maintains the order, maintains the dignity, the integrity of a thesis. So that is his very personal and professional aptitude. And whenever he is assigned with any topic to discuss, he also takes time and he prepares very well and comes to the discussion very aptly. Mm, he is a person who believes in inspiration, who believes in encouragement, and who believes in commitment. So far as his academic career is concerned, I shall not highlight on that. He has obtained PhD from perhaps Hyderabad University under the guidance of Professor Ramesh Pradhan, and he is a very dynamic scholar. Now he is working as an associate professor, young associate professor, I shall say, in Ravenshaw University. Before that, he was working as an assistant professor in Gangadhar Mehar University, and before that, he was also in Jammu University. So, this is his academic journey with great success. Today, he has a very beautiful topic to discuss, and it is new for me, and perhaps it is new for all. The ontology of ethical values. Actually, I have no idea about it. What is ontology of ethical values? We shall listen what the speaker will say. I love him. I have all respect for him. And whenever I request him to address on any topic, he never says no. So therefore, I love him because I also believe in commitment, and I find that flavor, that sense of commitment from Dr. Tarai. Thank you, sir. He is a person who always encourages me, always inspires me in my philosophical pursuit. Actually, I failed to introduce in a very formal way, so I introduced him in a very informal way. In a very, as like a family member, I introduced him, and he is also a family member of philosophy family. So no introduction, no more introduction is required. We shall now enjoy our academic flavor. Now with this, and I also welcome all Dr. Alok Tandon ji, Dr. Ranjit Ghosh ji, Srinivasan ji, Dr. Abhinash Srivastav ji, Raj, Rajashri Madam. Rajashri Madam is the spouse of Dr. Tarai, and I am happy that she is with us. Uh, Rabindra Jana sir, Narhari Mishra sir, and all others. So with this, we shall discuss. We shall start our discussion. Now I welcome our speaker, Dr. Tarai. Sir, please. Over to Dr. Tarai, sir.
I hope I'm audible and visible as well. Um, thank you. Good evening and namaskar, everybody. It is indeed a great pleasure to be part of this event. And it is, I must thank the organizers of this family group to provide me this opportunity to present my views on ethical values. Uh, And I must also thank Dr. Pramod Kumar Das for these generous words. And I can certainly say that I don't deserve all those things that he said about me, but it was, I'm very much thankful for all those words that he said. Uh, yeah, coming back to the topic that is, or the title of the topic, today's topic is called the ontology of ethical values. Yeah, it is, you are very much right that it is disguising in the sense that you need to source for a meaning for this topic. Uh, the main reason for this is this, that we do not discuss these things quite often. And I was quite influenced by one of the books which was published by Hilary Putnam, an American philosopher who died, I think, in 2016. Uh, a brilliant analytic philosopher who has a book called Ethics Without Ontology. So I think I have sort of borrowed this term from his idea that how ethics can be done without ontology. So, however, I should also mention that this is not a kind of, it is not a kind of very technical uh, idea of ontology that we discuss in Heideggerian philosophy, or the existential philosophy that we discuss. I don't think that I mean that kind of ontology to ethical values. What I precisely mean here is this: that when you understand or try to understand ethical values, we quite often situate them, right? So, and you have a great debate about moral subjectivism and moral relativism. Moral subjectivism is, all of us, we know that it is an idea which precisely says that ethical values are not objective in nature, in the sense they are basically opinions, they are basically interpretations of human beings. So, and therefore they are subjective, and they can be relative as well, they are contextual as well. And the other parallel view that we have is about ethical objectivity or moral objectivity, which says that ethical values are not subjective, rather objective in nature. So it does not depend on human interpretation. Sometimes they are also called as transcendental. Now, if this is the idea that to begin with, then my question is that when you say that it is objective, that where does it belong? The idea of ethical value as such, it belongs where, right? Now, to this question, we have two kinds of answers. One is that it belongs to this very natural world. It belongs to this world itself, right? And the other important uh, answer is this, that no, it does not belong to this natural world. Rather, it belongs to some other platonic kind of a world, and and that is something that you, I mean, we don't need to refer it. For example, Moore says that goodness is something that is indefinable, that you can't define goodness. The whole idea of goodness is not reducible to anything. And, and to some extent, Plato also talks about that. And Ali Wittgenstein also says that ethics is something that is transcendental in nature. Now, I think to this whole debate also is being contributed by this distinction that quite often we discuss. It's called fact-value dichotomy, right? So how values are different from facts. Now, until very recently, I mentioned about Hilary Putnam, and there is another philosopher called Achille Pellegrini, who is a professor at Columbia University. Now, these two philosophers, I don't know whether they have interacted with themselves, but they have kind of very similar views about the idea of ethical values, and they hold to this idea that ethical values do belong to this world, and they have argued for it. And I think it's a valid argument. For normative reasons, we do have to say that ethical values are not merely opinions, they are not judgments of human beings, rather, they belong to this world, and we need to identify them, right? And I do that for particularly for a normative reason. Right? Now, so what I wish to do in this presentation is this, that I will be talking about this fact-value dichotomy, and then I will try to relate how this fact-value dichotomy is actually not helping us to understand human agency. So therefore, we need to reject this idea of fact-value dichotomy, as Putnam tries to do that. And then I will try to pursue an argument which has been, of course, this is not my argument. It has been pursued uh, uh, originally by Achille Pellegrini. And then I will be talking in favor of him to say that if for normative reasons, we do have to say that ethical values exist in this very world itself where we live in, and we need to identify them, and what is the procedure to identify them, and things like that. So, so this is what the broad idea about the ontology of ethical values is. So let me begin with this dichotomy called fact-value dichotomy. I have a kind of a paper which has been published in 2020. So I will be partly reading that paper, and I have also added some part to it. So please bear with that, because I believe that this is a technical paper, so I can't be just speaking about it. So it is better to read it out, and sometimes I will be also explaining them. Yes, so the word fact is used in philosophy or otherwise in many ways. One understands fact as the obtaining state of affairs of Russell and Wittgenstein's analysis of the world in the philosophy of logical atomism. The other is the interest of natural science. This is scientific exploration and description of the world. The first is a particular metaphysical exercise backed by a logical language analysis. The other can be considered an epistemological quest for the exploration and description of the given. there is also another sense in which it is used, namely, it refers to that which deals with the development of social reality, essentially manufactured by human desires. So, along with the natural or the brute facts which are given to us, there is also another fact which has been manufactured by we human beings, and that is called social fact. So, a social fact is an existing state of affairs that is very much part of a society. So, they comply with rules and regulations for human convenience. So, these kinds of facts are discussed in the broad area of social ontology. And social ontology is a topic that has been lately discussed by John Saul, another analytic philosopher. Uh, so he, in a great deal, he discusses the idea of social ontology, and he talks about social reality, and his conclusion or kind of summary is this: that in order to understand the social world, we need to understand uh, the language that is underneath. So it is language that is extremely important to understand the social facts. So So values and social facts are usually intertwined. So it's not that social facts are independent of values or values are independent of social facts. They are quite intertwined in the sense, take an example that if I say marriage is a social fact or an institution, now loyalty in marriage can be considered as a value. So in that sense, you try to entangle both of them and then try to make a statement which can be a value-added statement. So the word value, on the other hand, can be discussed in three broad ways with regard to its grammatical forms as verb, adjective, and noun. Uh, as regard to the verb, a person P can value X, Y, Z. The word value is understood here as the activity of valuing. So this is to say that P is the person P is engaged in evaluating X, Y, Z, right, or in the evaluation of X, Y, Z. Now, value is also used as an adjective when X, Y, Z are valuable. So, for instance, I say X is a good watch or Y is a nice pair of shoes. So, in that sense, it's an adjective of that particular thing. Now, there is another sense that we use a value, it's called the noun sense of value, which indicates an existential consideration. And this is something interesting that I would like to pick up. For instance, P is valuable. P here is an object, it's valuable. P is a person who values, uh, values such and such uh, for a particular reason. P is valuable. P is an object here. I'm missing out some readings here. So yeah, so P is valuable in the sense that there is something that the moment you talk about a noun sense of a value, you try to refer it to that. So there is an existential consideration that lies in the fact that the value of X, Y, Z is indifferent to whether a person P values them or not. So it is like whether I value it or not, it doesn't matter, but that value is existentially there with that object or anything that you would like to pick up. So it is some kind of an intrinsic value that we talk about. For example, Aristotle talks about intrinsic value, that values, when you talk about values in themselves, right? So in that sense, we do use values, it's nouns. So my intention here is to discuss value as it's used as a noun, right? So So the fact-value dichotomy is considered to be a proclaimed dichotomy historically by the moral emotivism of Hume and later by logical positivism, which adds much flavor to keep this dichotomy intact. So value statements are mere expressions of human emotion and thereby are only evaluative. So they vary from statements concerning facts. Factual statements have the status of subject independency, and value statements have the status of subject dependency. This dichotomy gets much thicker with the development of logical positivism and its statement of value statements as being meaningless or what they call it nonsensical. So, much before the denunciation of logical positivism, there is this early analytic tradition. When you talk about Principia Ethica, which was written by G. Moore, who strongly upholds the view of this is-or dichotomy, which is famously termed by him as naturalistic fallacy for the enforcement of the dichotomy, uh, that that what ought to be the case cannot be logically derivable from what is the case. Now, this must not be equated with the understanding of logical positivism's claim regarding ethical values. There is a huge difference between logical positivist treatment of ethical values and Moore's treatment of ethical values. Uh, so the dichotomy seems important for concept control in case of analytic philosophers, particularly for Moore. So he uses this term, how facts are different from values, or you cannot just derive values from matters of fact, because he had to maintain uh, this thing called concept control, which is used in analytic philosophy, that we tend to always distinguish things in between so that things are clear, things are being analyzed properly. So this is basically a method in philosophy, method in analytic philosophy that people use. So I believe that it was the principal reason for, for Moore to say that the idea of goodness cannot be reducible to anything else, particularly the matters of fact. However, the dichotomy must not be used in the background to dismantle or devalue certain ideas, as it was the case with logical positivist understanding of ethical values as meaningless. So Moore had no such intention. And of course, Wittgenstein also, particularly R.D. Wittgenstein, also pronounces such kind of things about ethical values. He calls them transcendental, though later on in one of the aphorisms in the tract that he calls, they can be considered as nonsensical. But there is a huge difference between logical positivist understanding of ethical values as nonsensical and Wittgenstein's understanding of ethical values as nonsensical. So, which can be discussed later on. So, yeah. So now, if the fact value dichotomy is something that is clear, how it is there. I think for logical positivists, there is a reason that why they are saying that values are different from facts and values cannot be objectively verified, therefore they are meaningless. And how Moore, Wittgenstein, and all these early analytic philosophers are trying to talk about values. So there is this difference. Now, so the whole point that I'm trying to make is this: whether this fact value dichotomy or is-or distinction or dichotomy, whatever you call it, is it actually philosophically meaningful in the sense that what are the things that we are getting out of this dichotomy, out of this distinction, right? Is it actually providing us anything or not? So that is the point that we need to discuss. Now, as I said, Hilary Putnam has strongly rejected this dichotomy in its book called The Collapse of Fact Value Dichotomy, which was published in 2002. And he had his own reasons to reject that. And I find it is fascinating that this whole dichotomy is actually not helping us. So let me present his idea that how he is denying or how he is rejecting this whole dichotomy. So Putnam has strongly opposed fact-value dichotomy. He seems to reject the dichotomy that is upheld for methodological reasons by considering that it would evoke the dominance of the thought process. Now, if you look at early analytic philosophy, Moore and Wittgenstein, they are also trying to limit ethical values, which cannot be intertwined with matters of fact for methodological reasons. And for the same reason, Putnam is saying it would also face some other problem, and that is again methodological, right? So let's see what is that. And he is naming it, it will bring it would bring a kind of termination to the whole thought process if you always talk about distinctions or dichotomy. Now, this is, this is very difficult to digest, but this is how he is trying to say. So, why is he saying that the moment you make distinctions or dichotomy, it is actually making you lazy, or it is something that you end there. So, you are not trying to uh, sort of conceptually inherit those ideas further. So you will say, okay, this is the dichotomy, so I must not be worried about this. And this is fact, this is matter of fact. So I will not be talking about them, right? So he says that the worst thing about the fact value dichotomy is that in practice it functions as a discussion stopper. So I'm quoting Putnam here. He's saying that it basically functions as a discussion stopper, which means you stop the whole debate there, you stop the whole discussion there. And not just the discussion, but the whole thought that you stop there. So you are conditioned to think in such lines that, okay, this is a matter of fact, and this is the matter of ethical values. And if these domains are well defined, then I will not be talking in between. I will not be trying to juxtapose these two. And by doing that methodologically, I'm not actually processing my mind further, right? So, and thereby it becomes a thought stopper, right? So, so the dichotomy becomes a discussion stopper and thereby thought stopper because it might subdue the creativity of human intellect, which can potentially tend to go beyond the well-defined dichotomy. So Putnam, when pronouncing the dichotomy as a thought stopper, perhaps is afraid of other different possibilities that just do not fit into the dichotomy itself. That is also another reason that there are also certain things that they don't belong to this well-defined boundaries. So what will happen to them? So that could be another reason as well. So now, however, this is not the only reason for which Putnam rejects this fact-value dichotomy. In fact, the main reason for rejecting this dichotomy, as argued by Putnam, is what we call the economic reason. So he himself hasn't called it an economic reason, but I'm calling it economic reason. So he considers the economic reason and pursues it in need of the entanglement of fact and value. So he feels that we need to have a juxtaposition between fact and value. We can't just dismantle by saying that facts are facts and values are values. They must not interact with each other. Now, this is, by doing that, we are doing a great disservice to the humankind, disservice to the economy of the society, right? So now, how are we doing that? So, so the economic affairs of our welfare society should be hampered if proper attention was not given to social facts. And he says, if we do not see the facts and values that deeply entangled, we shall misunderstand the nature of fact as badly as logical positivists misunderstood the nature of value, right? So he emphasizes his argument by referring to our great Nobel laureate Amartya Sen, who has basically contributed to the whole idea of welfare economics, and for which he got Nobel Prize. Now, so he says that if you, so the project of welfare economics, which is considered to be based on certain general ethical ends. So real social development, that is the state of affairs which determines the welfare of the society, is only achieved if the right economic policies are in place. Now, these policies are expected to be value-oriented rather than merely profit-oriented. So the project is possible if there is a proper conjunction or entanglement between values and the social state of affairs. Thus, the so-called philosophical dichotomy doesn't really acknowledge the project of welfare economics, which was advocated by Sen. Now, theoretically speaking, so that would create problems. So if you just think ideal that facts are facts and values are values, so we will not be trying to juxtapose these two, and we will making harms to our society. Putnam is pursuing Sen's argument here, or Sen's idea of welfare economics. So, but then there is a merit to Sen's contribution, because he got Nobel Prize and it helped a lot of economics. It helped the growth-oriented societies. So in that sense, there is a merit. So you can't say that it is actually not helping. So we need to actually entangle both values and the social affairs, or the social facts. So 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 Putnam, therefore, in some other occasion, in his book called Ethics Without Ontology, which I mentioned in the beginning of the presentation, that he distinguishes in that book between inflationary and deflationary metaphysics, which are used to set some sort of backgrounds for moral values. Now, what is inflationary metaphysics and what is deflationary metaphysics, and how they are connected to ethical values, right? So he is here holding that this idea of inflationary metaphysics is something that is, that is what he calls that the whole idea of good or ethical value can be well discussed in terms of something. So it can be very much reducible to some other terminologies or to some other concepts, right? So, but if you follow a deflationary kind of metaphysics about ethical values, then you would say, or you would be tempted to say, that ethical values themselves are they cannot be talked about. For example, Wittgenstein said it is transcendental. I cannot talk about them, so it belongs to the domain of soyable. Or Moore said that it is indefinable. Now, that's a problem. He's saying it is a deflationary kind of metaphysics that we are doing while discussing the idea of ethical value or goodness in itself. So that's a problem. Now, we rather need to talk about them in certain terms, or we need to talk about them, or we need to reduce them to certain other things. So then only we can do, service to, basically the idea is that we can make human beings better human beings if we can actually reduce this idea of so-called transcendental values, as has been considered as ethical values, to our own domain, in the sense we can reduce them to our own concepts. So that is what he is hinting at. So I think this argument is quite coherent. For a methodological reason, of course, you can say that I need to understand what is a matter of fact and what is a value. That is all fine. But then, if you say that this is a very, very mutual, exclusive dichotomy or distinction that we must not mess with that, then that's going to be a problem. And quite rightly, that Putnam saw that problem. So, in that sense, he is trying to denounce this fact-value dichotomy. Now, taking a clue from Putnam, I must go to another philosopher that I mentioned in the beginning of the presentation. It's called Achille Villagranti, who is again an analytic philosopher. Now, Villagranti tries to extend this, this kind of idea that how values and matters of fact have to be sort of entangled in his work called The Visibility of Value, which he published in 2016, as in the form of an article. And then he also came up with a book, which is called Nature and Values. So these are the main works that Villagranti talks about in relation to matters of fact and ethical values. Now, what is his basic point? The basic point is that it is a kind of mistake. It is a kind of philosophical mistake to say that ethical values are not objectively there in the reality where we live in, right? Now, and he questions this by saying that who initiated this discussion by saying that ethical values are not objectively there in the natural world. And he blames the idea of modernity, or basically the scientificism as a method, that how natural science tries to study the natural world. As we always say that the natural world as a subject, it has to be studied by natural scientist or scientist. Yeah. So now he says it is their mistake to claim that values are not there. Now, how it is their mistake? I mean, maybe it is unknown to them, but how it becomes a mistake, it's discussed by Pellegrini in this way, that he says that, look, that when you try to sort of discriminate certain things from the natural world that you don't find, you claim that it is not there. And he gives an example that is commonsensically, when we talk about miracle, we talk about mysticism, miracle, magic, and so on, that a natural scientist would basically say that these things are not there. There is nothing called miracle. We are there to explain the nature, how the nature is there, or how the natural laws are constituted, or things like that. But miracle is something that is not part of our investigation precisely because it is not there. Now, Pellegrini counters this point by saying that it is not like that. Of course, you can reject miracle, but you can't reject in that way that values are not subject of rigorous studies. And therefore, you throw them out. It's like he uses this phrase called throwing the baby with the baby water. So it's not like that. So you must not do that, right? So there are certain things we need to talk about it. And as a philosopher, as philosophers, we must ponder about those things. Now, so let us get into Pellegrini's argument that how he is saying that these values are objectively there in this reality, right? So, so I'll not get into each dichotomy that Pellegrini implicitly tries to talk about, but so basically he says it is a superstition of natural science to say that the values are not part of the objective one, right? Now, now how it is a superstition? That what is a superstition, right? Superstition is a kind of belief that you form yourself, right? It is actually not there in the world, but you form yourself. And scientists are saying that those are superstitious beliefs, right? And those beliefs that do not conform to the natural world, right? Now, Pellegrini says, no, ethical values, they very much conform, okay, to the natural world. But only thing is that we need to realize, or we need to recognize or identify those ethical values, how they're being related to our beliefs, or what technically he calls desires, right? So, yeah, so Pellegrini, in a way, argues against the dichotomy by claiming that values are very much visible and they ought to be considered as properties in the world. So the dichotomy is irrelevant as it gives rise to a superstitious method, as I said, which is allegedly followed by natural science. One can identify Putnam's denigration with Pellegrini. However, Pellegrini did not make the claim against the dichotomy explicitly. This is my reading of Pellegrini. So one can identify Putnam's denigration for the same kind of concern. Putnam's concern for the economic affairs of the society can be recognized as Pellegrini's concern for the hazardous affairs of the natural world. There is one more point of agreement between Putnam and Pellegrini, which is that neither of them ascribes to any metaphysical basis for values, like early analytic philosophers. They tend to do that. So I shall immediately now point out the background and the arguments stated by Pellegrini for making these claims that objects are visible, or what he calls the objects are visible properties of the world, right? Now, so Pellegrini comprehends value properties or values as objects that are not of fire and water, but are of trade and cruelty. Trade and cruelty, what is a trait and what is a cruelty that we need to understand. So take an example for a trait. Now, the first point that I'm making is Bill Graham says that these objects, I mean, ethical values, age objects, or the value properties, they are objective properties of the world, okay, but not like fire and water, right? So fire and water, they belong to the water. You perceive them, and they are very much properties of the world. But when you talk about ethical values as properties of the world, now we need to consider life threats and cruelty. Right? Now, what is a threat? Try to understand in this way that a fisherman in a small, unequipped boat sees a thunderstorm in the middle of the sea, right? So imagine that you are in the middle of the sea and you are supposed to you are supposed to have gone for fishing. Now there is a thunderstorm, right? So there is cyclone-like situation, right? And your boat is not well equipped. So that's a threat that the fisherman perceives, right? Now, what is the example of a cruelty? Now, he says that, I mean, this is not his example, so I have tried to take an Indian context of that. And this is this that a mob in a local train murders a man for allegedly carrying a particular kind of meat, right? Now, so the person who travels looks at the mob in like he is fearful. Now, the person who perceives this whole episode, okay, now that person perceives cruelty here. Okay, the person who is perceiving the whole act of murder, right? Now, so these objects like threat and cruelty, are not supposed to be studied by natural science, of course. Uh, so Bill Graham objects to this view in the sense that you cannot study these things does not mean that these things are not there in the reality. So you can't denounce that these things are not there and therefore they are, they are like, I mean, basically you are not concerned about those things. So you cannot call them superstitious. So, he somewhere mentions, and I quote him, in our modernity, we are supposed to think that it is a superstition to claim that natural nature contains things, visible things, such as threats and cruelties, that the natural science cannot study. Whereas I have claimed that it is the denial of this claim that is the superstition. So he is basically challenging the natural scientist by saying that it is not a superstition to say that to study these things is a superstition, but not to study these things is actually a superstition. So, and that is a superstition which is coming from the whole project of modernity as such. So he's blaming modernity here. So now one can see his attempt to counter the understanding that a boundary has been set by science to study age and ethics to study art. Now he is basically or implicitly attacking this thing that it's not that science has to only study age and ethics has to only study art. Okay, there are also gray areas that we need to talk about. So, so Bill Graham mentions two arguments to validate his claim. The first one, he considers it to be a negative argument. He calls it a negative argument because it does not necessarily support his position that nature can also possess value properties. But the argument actually helps negatively in the sense that you can't say that these things are not there. So the negative argument only rejects the idea that there is nothing unscientific about the idea of nature, which contains properties and things that are the natural science cannot study. So in that sense, it is negative. So it is, however, believed to be unscientific for science or modernity to study miracles. So, and in this process, it eliminates value properties, right? So Bill Graham considers this elimination, what he calls it, an illicit extrapolation. So it's an illicit extrapolation that you do, which you are not supposed to do. So it is for him similar to, as I said earlier, to throwing out the baby with the baby water. So so let's get into the positive argument here, which I believe is very condensed. It's very deep. So now Bellingham brings up the role of agency to argue that the world contains value properties. Right now, so the distinction which he makes between the engaged, which he calls the practical self, and the disengaged, that's a theoretical self, in order to make sense of agency, is a distinction between two different perspectives. Right. So to understand the engaged self and to understand the disengaged self is actually about two different perspectives. Now, the disengaged self is interested to know reality in a detached way, right? Now, as he writes that, and I quote, in many of our ordinary observations, we think of the world in a detached way, quite informally. For example, when I say that's a square table, here is the tree in the garden, the water in the lake is cold, she is going to class, etc. But when we do natural science, that detached perspective takes its most regimented form, and we predict and explain the objects, properties, and events in the world, bringing them under laws and generalization, moving to a vocabulary of molecules, H2O, neurons, etc. Now, he's saying that we try to read this world both informally and formally. So, when we try to read things about this world informally, we make the judgments like, oh, she is going to a class, there is a table in front of me, and so on, right? So, now when you try to read formally, which seems to be a very, very attached, very, very engaged kind of reading, but actually not engaged kind of reading, it is yet again detached, though it is done formally. Okay, so and he is referring it to the scientists, that how they try to generalize the laws of nature, or how these natural scientists tend to make things or tend to make theories about the natural world. So now. Now, what is basically he is saying here is this, that, and I can bring one more synonymous distinction here, that to make sense of the attached self and the detached self, or what he calls engaged self and disengaged self, is this, that whenever we make this statement called "I predict that I will do," and the second statement is that I intend that I will do. Now, in these two statements, there is a difference, and the difference is a difference of two perspectives. So please try to understand. This is a very technical point. One statement says that I predict that I will do, and the second is I intend that I will do. Now, what is the meaning of saying that I predict that I will do? Now, in case of prediction, you are not 100% engaged, right? So, yes, I mean, you will do it, but that's like a detached way of doing it, right? Now, he says, when natural scientists, of course, they seem to be very rigorous, but they are merely predicting the whole reality, okay, in so and so regions. Now, that's a detached way of understanding the reality. That's not a practical self who is doing, rather it's a theoretical self who is trying to understand the natural world. But I mean, in contrast to this view, then when you make this statement called "I intend that I will do," there you are actually engaged, right? So you will definitely do it, right? I'll take a rough example. I mean, an ordinary example, that when Dr. Pramod Kumar Das asked me that are you free to present a paper on so and so date? Now, if I am disoriented, so I would say that well, I mean, well, let's see. I mean, I mean, whether I can be, it can be possible for me to present my views on so and so topic or not. Now that's a detached way of you know, making a judgment. Now, if I say yes, I'll do, okay, which means I am 100% engaged. So I will do it means I'll do it. Okay, so that's my engagement and aspect of myself who is engaged. I am obliged, or, or I have the moral duty to do that, right? So basically an engaged. So now, so yeah, so in that context, let me quote him again, that that is, if we have to be practical agents engaged with the world must contain elements over and above the elements that natural science studies. Unless we describe the world in value terms as containing such things as threats and cruelty, we could not be engaged with it in the practical sense. So the idea is that if you are detached, you will not be able to read threats and cruelties. Okay. And that's a normative demand that is there in case of a human person. Now, if you are just a human being, you are just trying to predict the whole reality as scientists are trying to do. That's the point that he's making. So, so the practical agent and the value properties are somehow essentially linked here. Okay. So value properties like threat and quality are linked with the normative self, or what we call the practical agent, or engaged self. Okay. Now they are essentially linked because the idea of agency, that is the practical agent, cannot be apprehended conceptually, at least in the present context, if there is no value property. So value property, the value property is actually necessitating the self that who is engaged with that. So what is implied from this is that the agent relates to the world where there are value properties such as threats and cruelty. If someone is not able to relate, he or she fails to become a practical agent. For example, who behaves quite to the model, I mean that, or the tourist comes from through an aesthetic gate at the seaside. So think and think about, at the seaside, enjoy of the sea uh, when there is a thunderstorm, right? So and the person who is indifferently to the model, and these days, if there is a model happening, if there is something, then what we tend to do, we take out our mobile and look at it. We try to take selfie, and now this is what Billy Graham. This is not all these things like the pacifist who is enjoying the thunderstorm and is quite indifferently, right? Link between self and value properties is Billy Graham in terms of the point that he is making, that how this and the self with each other. They are into the idea called desirability and desire of the self, right? So what he is trying to say here is this, that human beings are certainly having desires, but there is a constant Hello, can you hear me? Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Right. Okay. So yeah, idea of desirability and desire can further be extended or can be understood. Uh, I think there is this philosopher called Harry Frankfurt who makes a distinction between what he calls first order desire and second order desire, right? And if you can understand this distinction, we can make sense of desire and desirability of Pilgrim's position here. Now, what Frankfurt had in mind is this, that he says, okay, when you talk about first order desire, uh, it is basically a desire that is uh, related to an object which is external to you, right? Suppose I desire for food, I desire to have water, and so on, right? Now that's a first order desire, which means my desire is linked with something which is external to me. Now, the second order desire is something that is very, very important. Now, second order desire is what? That it is a desire not related to an object, rather, it's a desire about a further desire, right? So basically, you are desiring a desire. Now, what is the meaning of saying that you are basically desiring a desire? In the sense that you try to, it's a meta level desire that you uh, involve yourself, or you start critically analyzing your first order desire. So your first order desire is related to the object outside you, but the second order desire is desiring your first order desire. Desiring in the sense, not in a positive sense that I want that, but that conceptually or critically you are best analyzing the first order desire. So that's the second order desire that Frankfurt said. And Frankfurt in this connection makes a distinction between a human being and a human person. He says those who are involved in first order desire, they are basically human beings, like right? And since you have got life, you would require food and things like that. So that's first order desire. Now, the second order desire is a human person. That's a normative human being who is engaged in analyzing his first order desire, which means what is right to do and whether whatever I desire in the first order desire, is it right to desire that or not, right? So that's the thing. So I think Belgrami is trying to talk about desire and desirability in that connection. Not only thinking about it, rather also engaging itself in a practical sense, that we need to be more engaged, not in a physical sense, but in a conceptual sense, that we need to analyze those things. We need to look at things as they are mine, right? So that's how Pellegrini talks about a practical agent or an engaged self. So so one can extend Pellegrini's unification of the engaged self with value properties of the world to the idea, because of its claims that desire and other states of mind must be responses to value properties in the world in order for us to be agents, and to the idea of moral realism, because the world contains value properties. So you can say he might be read in this way, that he is talking about moral realism. He is also talking about moral relativism, right? So, I mean, there is a conceptual incoherence, but I think we should not bother about that conceptual incoherence. We should be rather concerned about values as they can be recognized, as they can be identified, which are very much open to us. It only needs a kind of what Bilgrami or others say, that an oriented self to realize, yes, there is value. Okay, so I accept that there are conceptual problems with Bilgrami's idea, that when he talks about value properties and desire in itself. So yeah, so there is a problem, but I think that problem should not bother us for normative reasons. So that is the thing about Bilgrami's thing. So yeah, I mean, I have also in detail discussed Bilgrami's problems, but I don't want to get into that, because for me that is not important. What is important is that how we can be related to this world uh, very, very closely. Okay, so it's but if you talk about the fact value dichotomy, if you say that there is a metaphysical background to ethical values and they are transcendental and so on, then we feel that there is no need to talk about them, right? So I think that's a problematic thing that early analytic philosophy, particularly Moore and Wittgenstein, are making. So I think we should get rid of that kind of thinking, even though there is a problem with Putnam and Moore. Sorry, Putnam and Bilgrami. We still have to acknowledge that yes, we are engaged and we can see there are values for at least for normative reasons. Yes. So I stop it here, and if you have any question, any comment, any suggestion, you may
Thank you, sir.
give.
This is really
Over to you, sir. Yeah.
yes, yes. Thank you. This is really a technical paper, as you said, and very beautifully you presented your thought. I wonder that Western philosophers are taking much pain in discussing the dichotomy of fact and value, which is very well discussed in our Indian text. The way you presented this paper, I salute to you, sir. Very clearly and very lucidly, you presented this paper. I am just summarizing in my own language. I shall not go to the analytical approach as you made, um, taking different names, Ballygramy and Putnam and others. There are two types of views, two groups of people. One group, they are trying to explain everything by giving natural explanation, taking everything as fact. And this is also very scientific. This is also true. This is also true. Hey Santi, Santi, practical now. I am talking now. Sorry. This is scientific. Everything is only factual. Is it not true? This is their claim. There is blood circulation, there is breathing. Yes, there is movement of stars. Everything is taking place as a matter of fact. Don't add any value. There is no necessity. Don't take anything from the value perspective. This is one view, that every phenomenon can be explained naturally. From that we can infer, we can generalize, we can predict. This is one view. And that is based upon our observation, that is based upon our perception, our experiment. And whatever is known through that, that is taken as knowledge. And we are bound to be satisfied with that. This is the natural explanation. The second group, they believe in, I am not discussing value. They believe in the psychological impact, that how we interpret this world from our psychological perspective. And this is the human possibility, that we are all human beings. We have our very developed mind, we have rationality. So we give our psychological interpretation, psychological response. So there is a difference between reaction and response. When we believe in reaction, we follow Newton's law. Every action has its equal and opposite reaction. By that way, we can explain everything naturally. But when we speak about response, human response, here we can respond to something contrary to the facts. The moment you are feeling, the moment you are insulted, you may not be insulted. The moment you are hungry, you may not express your hunger. That means psychologically you can respond to a stimuli, to a phenomenon, to a fact differently. Therefore, many minds, many thoughts, many human beings, many types of interpretations. This is the psychological response. And when there is such a possibility, value comes. We are concerned with value, because there is psychological evaluation. Okay, if psychologically I respond to a fact, I have a response of my own, then I discriminate what is desire and what is desirable. What should I desire many things. This is a fact. But what is desirable and what is not desirable, that is my psychic response. Shreya and Preya in Kathopanishad. Everything that is desired may not be desirable. So the desirability and not desirability, this distinction is a psychological distinction. It is a matter of choice, because this is the possibility of a human intellect, and this is a human possibility. Animals don't have that capacity to have any psychological response off and on any natural fact. So there are two groups. One group, they believe in natural explanation, and the other group, they believe in psychological explanation, and they believe in value, and they take value as a transcendental, not empirical. It is a transcendental. Transcendental means beyond the empirical, beyond phenomenal, beyond uh, um, experience. I am giving an example. When we experience a fact, that happens according to the natural order. Something takes place in the nature, that is a matter of fact. But when I experience that fact, that there should be a synchronization between the occurrence of a fact, or the ending of a fact, and ending of my psychological experience. Many times what happens, facts take place and they end, but we continue our experience. We hang over that experience. We desire its continuity. We desire its continuity, which is not desirable. We desire that fact must continue, because psychologically I desire that. This is a mental slavery, mental slavery. We are slave after our attachment, because we don't want that the fact should end. If the fact should continue, but the fact will not continue according to our desire, according to our passionate desire to continue it. But this is a psychological response, and human existence is more psychic than physical. We exist psychologically. We believe, I mean, now there is a problem of Hetuvadis. There is a great debate whether there are many debates. I am not discussing that. But whenever you believe in something, either of this or that, you are dogmatic, because you have a psychological trait, psychological faith, and and you adhere to that. To any ism you believe, any ism you advocate, you belong to that regime. This is a psychological response to a particular situation. So in the first part, in the first group, we can say it logical positivism. We can say it purely scientific. It is factual. There is no need. It is we can say there is no need of value at all. But when we when we interpret something psychologically, and we give our response, and we respond, and we exist accordingly, we exist according to our response. Therefore we exist differently. There comes the value, whether it is desirable. Desirable means it is a valued desire. If it is, when we say I desire, it is a fact. When I say it is desirable or not, here comes the question whether it should be desired, whether it should be desired or not. It is the question of a value. So there are two groups, and naturally, we shall take both the positions, that yes, everything happens irrespective of our psychological response. Suppose I am sleeping, the world is going on. Everything takes place according to the natural law. So that is a fact. But the moment I am awakening, I am aware of the fact, I am becoming aware of the fact, I am superimposing my psychological responses on the fact. And this is also very natural. Number two. Number three, what is moral objectivism? Moral objectivism. Moral subjectivism, it is understood because it comes from our psychology. From moral objectivism, we are discussing about applied ethics. You can't say that it is only morality is only subjective. We can say morality is also objective, because it is discussed, it is lived in a particular context. In a particular context, in a particular time, in a particular space, we take something as a value, something as desirable, something having ethical value, but the same action is treated unethical, immoral in another context. And we respect that particular context, and we value that accordingly. So here the value is not subjective, here the value is objective. So far as the applied ethics is concerned, we very much deal with the objective value of objectivity of a value. We can't deny that. If we have a understanding of a value, that may be theoretical, but when we live with that value in a particular context, and we are ready to change ourselves according to the change of the context, that there it becomes objective. So both the objective and subjective aspect of a value should be entertained by all of us. That theoretically I am very much sound about the cardinal values, the fundamentalism, the absolutism, but ethical relativism should also be given importance so far as the context is concerned, where we deal with the objectivity of a value. This is my understanding of what you said. But I have a question to you, sir. You discussed very aptly, um, very meticulously about both the positions, about the dichotomy of fact and value. What is your conclusion? How do you conclude? Yes, you will answer my question later on. Now I shall request Dr. Rao to moderate the session and invite others to have their observation and continue the discussion. Thank you, and I appreciate very much Dr. Ashok sir for having a very beautiful deliberation on this topic. Thank you. And he made a distinction between ontology and metaphysics. Ontology deals with existence. Ontology deals with being. Ontology deals with and metaphysics means that is something transcendental. Okay, by metaphysics we should not say that ethics don't have any ethics does not have any practical value. In that sense, metaphysics is not it should not be taken in that sense. So rather we shall use the word ontology. Ontology is a very appropriate term so far as this discussion is concerned. Thank you.
Thank you. Namaskar, everybody. Well, I could not listen to the whole of the talk because I was on the way, but still, I should thank everybody. I'm not commenting now. Well, I request Dr. Alok Tandon sir, because he was there when I joined. Well, I request him to have his observations because this is his area, I think, and will be his observations would be highly beneficial for all of us. Namaskar, sir. Your observations, sir.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rao, for asking me for my comments, which are not many, because this is not my area in the sense the ontology of values is a very, very controversial topic since the since last century when this whole proposition of fact value dichotomy came about, and a lot of discussion took place. But what I find very interesting in the presentation was the denial of that dichotomy. And that denial of that dichotomy is based on actual life experience, I think, of just juxtaposition of both the things together in human life. So, in any abstract sense, if we try to separate the two, that is not going to help us in our living. So, but what are the grounds? Here, there are many questions. First of all, can we say that a fact, a natural fact, and a social fact, and a psychological fact, are they the same in their objective sense? Or can we introduce some sort of graded objectivity in all three? The question I am asking is also related to what Professor Das was saying, that desire is a fact, a psychological fact, but desirability is not. Why? If first order desire is a fact, why not the second order desire is a fact too? This is the question. Now, I don't want to go into evaluating Putnam's approach as well as Wilgrami's approach. Wilgrami is very difficult to understand, and I think we need a very, very careful reading of these two persons. But the simple thing is, if we say that crime is not a fact, natural fact, it is just a value, then what is the importance of justice? What is the importance of law? What is the whole politics? What is the relevance of all that? So I think the value question is as important as the question of facts. And to say that science only deals with facts is, I think, is outdated. We know there are thinkers in social biology and evolutionists also. They try to find out how values got evaluated, not in evolution of human beings, how values played a very large part, and how they were inculcated. Another thing I would like to ask the professor is, do you think that this all the values are relative, or do you think that some values can be universal also? And once you take this view of universality of values, then I think you can be on a very, very strong ground compared to the whole idea of scientism, which is being propagated in the name of science. So I think science never denies any experience, any human experience, though it may not be able to explain that at the moment of existing knowledge. Thank you very much.
Well, well, doc,
Okay.
well, Dr. Tarai, Dr. Tarai, huh?
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much, sir. I think you asked some of the very important questions. I would like to answer the last one first, about the science that it also these days it is also trying to understand values. I don't know. I mean, I took it in the spirit that the way modernity functions. So the whole idea of science actually searches for certain general region. So for that methodological purpose, I took science mostly in that sense. So if it is a latest development that science is also evolving, which tries to understand human values, or how scientific inquiry can be related to human values, I don't know. I would like to see that. Okay, so that's the thing. And then about this natural fact, social fact, and psychological fact. See, what I had in mind is this. When I mean by a fact, I only talked about natural fact and social fact. So a natural fact is something, as all of us, we know that it is something given to us, right? We haven't created it. For example, water. Water is something that is given to us. But when you try to read water as in the form of H2O, that is not, now that's a human interpretation of water. So it differs from a farmer, that when a farmer tries to understand water, he is not trying to read water as H2O, rather he sees water as a value, in the sense that if you ask a person who is coming out of Vidarbha, where there is no much rain in the rainy season, so he knows the value of water there. So I think what Bilgani is suggesting is this, that we need to develop that kind of, so to say, attitude to understand the nature, rather to go the mechanical details of it. And that's a detached way of understanding nature. and same with social fact, right? See, in social facts, you will have problems that what is right and what is wrong. It's a very relative. It's a very, at a fundamental level, it is definitely relative. I do accept that. But what Bilgrami is saying that, of course, whenever there is a problem, that whether to kill somebody is ethically right or wrong, that's within the debate. I mean, right? You can very well justify that. Yes, it is right to kill somebody if that person has done so and so. And if you can also take the opposite view that no, it is not right. It is not morally right to murder someone or to kill someone, whatever it may happen. It might have happened. So now these are two different things. I do accept that. But what Bilgram is saying, forget about considering right or wrong. Just think that how attached we are to the social reality. I mean, the person who is taking a selfie with the accident that has happened, that person hasn't developed that agency. So he is definitely a detached person, right? So considering helping somebody is a different thing. But taking a selfie with that accident scene, is something that it's unthinkable, isn't it? As a moral agent, as a human person, as a normative human being. So that is his focus is. Of course, there will be, as you talk about relativism, that will be there. But then you can bring rationality into the discussion that yes, rationally it is right and this is wrong and so on. That can be done. So I totally agree on that. That yes, when you talk about social facts, there will be problems. Now, about psychological fact, I did not talk about psychological fact at all. Now, I think I was misunderstood when I talk about desire and desirabilities. Now, what Bilgrami means by desirability is this, that he is trying to extend. There is this analytic philosopher who died very early. His name is Gareth Evans, who has a book on reference. So that man tries to bring a distinction between belief and believability. Now, what he means by belief is this, that when you try to make a belief about the world, your belief is not something that is self-standing. It is not empty. It is always trying to connect with the nature of the reality. Now, that connection might be wrong or right? But your belief is always oriented towards the natural world, okay, to the world that you are looking at. Now, your belief is yours, definitely, but your belief is guided by believability. Now, that believability is part of the world. So likewise, a desire is very much psychological. There is no dispute about that. But the idea of desirabilities, for example, cruelty and trade, the object that he talks about, are part of the world. Okay. You are only trying to relate it to yourself. So that is something that we must understand. So it is not like it's a psychological fact. Your desire can be psychological, your belief can be psychological, but your believability that you are trying to connect to the natural world, that's not. So that's a technical point that these analytic philosophers are trying to make, starting from Gareth Evans and Putnam and so on. So yeah, so that is the thing. And yeah, so the crime is not a fact or a value that I think I have partly answered in the sense that, see, crime is definitely, I mean, it's not a fact. It's like when a murder happens, that's a fact. Okay, there is no doubt about it. But to evaluate that murder, that belongs to a value domain, right? Now he is not saying whether we will consider it right or wrong. So that's not the whole discussion. The discussion is whether you are capable of evaluating that or not. Now, as a human being, we have lacked that quality of evaluating those things. And take this classic example that taking a selfie in front of an accident. Now, that's a bizarre kind of thing that to do. So that is the point that Bilgram is trying to make. Yes, I think I tried to answer you, and if I missed out, please pardon me. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Tarai. Well, Pramod Kumar Das sir wanted to say something. Well,
Yeah,
then
please,
we'll
please,
move,
please go ahead, sir. Please go ahead, sir. Yeah.
then we'll move to Dr. Ranjit Ghosh sir.
No,
Yeah, yeah, please, please.
I am wishing to say, because some questions were also asked to me on my observation, the, that desire and desirable both are psychological, because
It's not desirable, it's desirability. It's like an object.
No,
Yeah, that's what he's saying.
I am talking about desirable. What is I am talking about desirable.
Oh, fine, no problem.
When I say desirable, it is value centric. When I say I desire, it may be instinctive because I want something. When I want something, it is a psychological process, but its cause, its ground may be my instinct, maybe maybe mechanical, maybe I desire many things out of necessity, factual necessity. But when I say it is desirable or not, here I am applying my rationality. This is a higher order of a psychological process. Here comes value that what I desire is desirable or not. That is called Viveka Jnana. There we apply our intellect. And you also said very correctly, I am just complimenting you that you are saying that the sense of agency comes here, that the human involvement comes here. You are taking the word detachment in a very beautiful way, not in the Indian way. You are taking detachment in the way you are saying that man should be attached with the fact. That is the complete involvement. When man is totally involved in fact, man is not detached from the fact, he can utilize his proper agency. There only he can be aware of the value, that whether it is desirable or not. What I desire, here desire becomes a fact, that I desire, it is true, and I witness my desire. There are many desires, but I choose my desire whether it is desirable or not. This is a human possibility. Animals desire and they try to get that. They desire and they eat. They desire and they do. But we desire and we withdraw because it is not desirable. This possibility is there, and because of this possibility, we can have our better psychological response. Therefore, human personalities are different. Therefore, you are different from me, I am different from you, and Vivekananda is different from all of us, and there are different types of personalities. And I mean to say this much. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Professor Das. Well, let's move to Dr. Ghosh sir. Ranjit Ghosh sir, please. Namaskar sir. Your observations and questions.
Hello, am I audible now?
Yes, sir. Audible.
Right. Yeah, thank you, Dr. Rao, and we must thank our young friend for bringing a new dimension to find out an ontology-free logic. Normally, when all the ethics is being taught to the students, ethics is always preceded by an ontology if ontology is taken in the sense of a worldview. So, if I will opt for prayas or shreyas, I will opt for karma yoga or karma sannyasa. These are all based on certain worldviews which are preceded by it. Now, what Putnam is doing here, Putnam is not doing ethics, he is doing meta-ethics. Because what Putnam is trying to suggest, that can there be an ontology-free objectivity of ethics? But that was just the beginning of his thinking. His primary concern was to find out, can there be an ontology-free objectivity of logic? So prior to that, he tried to bring this ethics into discussion, in the forum of discussion. Now, Dr. Tarai has in his last part of lecture, has brought these two things, first order desires and second order desires. So here, actually, the key to the problem exists, I should say. Because if you take the discussion, I don't remember exactly right now, Professor Tandon must be knowing, a social construction of reality. And there, actually, what is done, the construction is is based on the second order desire. And so also in you are talking of Sen, Professor Sen. Professor Sen has given his noble lecture as the possibility of social choice. And that is also a type of metaethical discussion based on the second order desire. So now the thing is, in my opinion, of course, we bring Putnam and others, the other philosopher whom you have referred. I have not gone through him, so I do not know. Pilgrim or kya? No, yes. Anyway,
Uphill pilgrim, yeah.
yeah, I will go through your when it will come to us in the form of a PDF. Yes, what I was suggesting, that we cannot just think of ethics or ethical values without a prior ontological background. So that is what is the ordinary understanding of things suggests. How do you react to this? Thank you.
Dr. Tarai.
Yeah. Thank you for such a wonderful remark. Yeah, you are mostly right. Whatever you made, whatever the comments that you made about the social construction thing. Yes, you are very right that when you try to construct a social reality, for example, take this very common example of university, right? University is a desired institution that we have made it, right? Money, property, all these examples that are being given by John Saul. So these are all well thought out, organized way of establishing social realities. So there is a second order desire involved. Now, first order desire is only about certain objects that you need them for the sake of your, biological. It's purely a biological need, right? So that's first order desire. Now, so I totally agree on that. That this whole idea of social construction is a second order desire, and there we are highly engaged. In fact, wherever there is, second order desire, we are definitely engaged. Okay, of course, while engaged, you can make mistakes. So that's a part of the game, but we are at least we are engaged. Now, about the last point that you said, this that ethics must have an ontological background. Now, you see, when Putnam talks about ethics without ontology, he is not completely denying an ontological setup for ethical values. What he is saying, he is making a distinction between inflationary metaphysics, or you can call it ontology, or deflationary metaphysics. Now, what is deflationary here is this, that when you talk about goodness or ethical value as such, for example, goodness is a value, right? Now, the moment you say that I must not be having any kind of condition to define goodness, now that's a kind of deflationary kind of thing, in the sense, what are you basically doing? What kind of purpose that it is fulfilling? To say that goodness cannot be reduced to any kind of conceptual discussion, right? So conceptual discussion in the sense, basically it is not conditional, right? So take the example of Kant, that goodness is something that it is good in itself, right? So now that's a problematic thing that Putnam is saying. Not for methodological reasons, for philosophical reasons, it's all fine, but for normative reasons, for ethical purpose, that what it makes, what kind of things that it makes for human beings as normative human beings. So that is the problem that he's saying. So he's saying that we need to discuss them in our own day-to-day life, in our realities where we are living in. So you can have this kind of ontology where we are basically living in. Okay, so we must have to relate ourselves to this reality, and reject the idea that it cannot be derived, or it cannot be discussed, or you cannot talk about it. For example, Arlie Wittgenstein said that ethics is something that is transcendental. You cannot talk about it, therefore you must be silent about it, and it belongs to the soable and things like that. So these are unwarranted things that we have done to ethics. This is what I think Putnam is trying to suggest. So rather, we should try to say that we are engaged with those values and and in that, of course, you make mistakes and things like that. So there comes the role of rationality. Yes. So of course, yes. I mean, ethics has to be guided by some kind of ontology, but that ontology is like where we are. I mean, this is the very reality that we are talking about. Now, if you say that ethics is something that is transcendental, and we must only talk about it, not and not by reducing it to anything else, then that's going to be a problem for normative reasons. Yes, that is my answer. Thank you, sir.
Thing I would suggest to you to check this. I don't remember exactly right now. The thing is, whether morality is subjective or objective, this question was taken up well by R.M. Hare, and he said that it is he coined a new another terminology in the form of institutional morality. Suppose college is an institution, so that institutional morality is both objective and subjective. So in this way, we can bring out, of course, in the present context, discussion of present context, Putnam is coming very nearer to us than RM here. So that also makes sense as far as I think it. So thank you
Yeah,
for your
thank you,
answer.
sir. Yeah, sir, thank you for your suggestion. I haven't read Aram here, but I would look for it. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bose, for your observations, and also I thank Dr. Tarai for his beautiful understanding of the entire concept. Well. Before going to, if anybody is interested to have his suggestion or raise a question, they are welcome. But in the meantime, well, something has come to my mind. I don't know because I have not listened to the whole of the lecture. I was on the way, but still, well. Hilary Putnam, he criticizes this fact value dichotomy, and he tries to entangle fact and value. This reminds me of Kant when he's criticizing empiricism and rationalism, and then not happy with any one of them. He makes a blend of the two and says that concepts without percepts are empty, and percepts without concept are blind. So, in a similar fashion, can't we think of this fact and value? We say facts without value are blind, and values without facts, or values without any factual content, are empty. Is it the way that Putnam is going on with?
Yeah,
So,
I mean, you have.
Kantian fashion, we can
Yeah,
put
yeah, yeah,
in a
yeah,
Kantian fashion.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Sir,
yeah.
anyway,
Yeah, yeah,
thank
yeah,
you.
yeah. Beautifully, you have narrated that. Yeah, 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 yeah,
I
yeah.
think
I completely agree with that. So yeah, this is the need of the hour. This is, I mean, that is how this two philosophers indirectly, I mean, Putnam very indirectly and Bilgrami very directly, suggesting that we need to entangle these two things. I mean, what is the point that talking about values only in theoretical realm? That values are transcendental and things like that. And what is the idea that to talk about facts only saying that it is a matter of legality, it is a matter for natural scientists and so on? Then I mean, the job of philosopher is to basically entangle them, as Bilgrami is suggesting. I mean, I think you are absolutely right, and yeah, you are with me. Thank you, sir.
thank you, Dr. Tarai. Well, we have with us Srinivasan Krishnamurthy, sir. Well, welcome, sir. Please, your observations and comments, sir, and questions, sir. Namaskar, sir.
Okay.
Namaskar, sir.
Namaskar. Namaskar. Am I audible there?
You're audible, sir.
Okay. Pranams and good evening to Professor Ashok for your excellent presentation about the ontology of the ethical values. I am also tempted to ask a comparison between the deontological ethics. It is an action considered morally good because of some characteristic of the action itself, not because the product of the action is good. Deontological ethics holds that at least some acts are morally obligatory, regardless of their consequences and for human welfare. So, if you compare duty for duty's sake, is it can be mandatory as well as obligatory, whereas morality is totally mandatory. There is a switch between these two, and virtue is its own reward. And let justice be done through the though the heavens fall. Kindly explain the ontological ethical value between this and the deontological ethics between the action, duty, and morality. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you for the question, sir. Yeah, I think this whole idea of deontological ethics is precisely, yeah. Am I audible?
Yes, sir, audible.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah. Thank you. Yeah. I mean, I think the whole idea of deontological ethics is about an ethical principle. Please remember that deontology is a principle, right? And like utilitarianism is a principle, like virtue is a principle, which is coming from Aristotle, and the utilitarian principle is coming from Bentham and Mill, people like yeah, so Bentham and Mill, and then it is coming from Kant. Now the idea is that they're all trying to justify an action by saying that an action is justified for so and so reasons, right? Now, when we talk about, in this particular context, when we talk about ontology of ethical values, I mean, it is secondary to judge a principle. My concern is not that to judge an action, okay, through a principle, rather to attach that action to myself, what is there in the reality, whether I am actually engaged with that or not. Now, once you are engaged, then you can, by applying a region or anything that you would like to have, by applying that, you can say that, oh, whether it is right or not. Of course, deontological ethics really helps there. But then the problem with this whole idea of deontological principle is this, that it's too ideal in nature, right? So it's like, okay, so you behave like a robot there. Okay. So I mean, I am afraid to say that, but this is how it happens. So you do not have any judgment there. You do not have any engagement there. Okay. So an action is right in itself. That's it. You have no engagement there. So that is the difference. I mean, the ontology of ethical values is it's not trying to talk about ethical principle per se, but it is talking about a human engagement with the reality. So that is how I can say. But yeah, deontological principle is all fine. I mean, there is no problem about it. And of course, there are criticisms about deontological principles, utilitarian principles, and things like that. But I don't want to get into that. My point is that prior to that, whether I am engaged with this reality or not. So that is the question that I wanted to raise in this lecture. Yeah. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Well, Dr. Well, Professor Das from Yes. Yes, sir.
Um, 1 minute. I am muting Srinivas. Okay. I shall ask to Dr. Ghosh, Ranjit Ghosh sir. Here's institutional morality is something as a contextual morality that is discussed in applied ethics and Bhagavad Gita. Do you agree or not, sir? Institutional morality, the way we interpreted that is same as the contextual morality. Are they same or different? Unmute,
Please
sir.
unmute, please unmute, sir. Please unmute.
Please repeat your question once again.
You spoke about institutional morality said by
Here.
here.
Yeah,
And
that is language of morals. That is the book, Hare's book, and it was given there. So how to bring. Normally, we believe that morality is subjective, but the question of objectivity always haunts moral situations. So that's why he brought this institutional morality. Of course, I don't remember what I have read at that time in detail, but probably I think that is how he tried to bring this the subjectivity and objectivity of morals into one here. So what about the Gita's position, you tell me?
Yes, sir. That is the same thing we discussed in applied ethics. In contextuality, we are dealing with both fact and value, both subjective and objective aspect of value. In a particular context, we take the value as objective, and also, as Dr. Tarai said, we have our own involvement, we have our own agency.
Right.
In that sense, we have our subjective involvement there. We have our subjective involvement over an objective fact in contextuality. Bhagavad Gita is saying that. So far as deontological theory of Immanuel Kant, this thing is missing. There we take it only as a theory. Duty should be done for the sake of duty. Here in Bhagavad Gita, we are speaking of duty plus. Okay. So,
Right, you are
so
right, because duty for duty's sake is discussed in a transcendental context, but Gita never says that. The
no.
Gita is the philosophy of action that we have to put into our own lives. That is why that is the difference from duty for duty's sake and Bhagavad Gita's Niskama Karma.
Sir, the same action is judged as true in one context. After just 5 minutes, that action will be treated as a wrong action, depending upon the context.
Right.
So our duty will vary according to the context. Your duty may be that you should speak to the truth. After 5 minutes, principal will declare, don't speak truth before the neck trim. So that is also your duty for a greater perspective. That is Lokasangraha. Whatever is good for Lokasangraha, that is your duty. So telling truth is duty, telling lie is also duty. And as in symbolic logic, what we know that a proposition has two truth values. Truth is a truth value, falsity is also a truth value. That means you should be truthful to a situation by telling truth or by telling lie. You should be truthful to a situation. So ethics is situational. Value is situational. And Dr. Tarai, I really enjoyed this. He is saying that our personal involvement as an agent with the facts, happenings of the world is important. Whether I am involved in a fact or not, and in what extent and in what intensity I am involved. That is our personality. If I am just only speaking, discussing, debating about moral values, it is of no use. Whether we are living with that morality or not. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Over to Dr. Rao.
Thank you, Professor Das. Well, I should thank everybody for making this evening so good. Well, if somebody is interested for having any observation or if somebody is interested, well, we'll wait for a minute. I don't see anybody unmuting. I don't even see any pushing in the chat box. So, well, so we should, sir.
I gave a very informal introduction about Dr. Tarai in the beginning because I usually fail to do that. So you please give a very beautiful introduction and a vote of thanks.
No, it is not needed, sir. I think we all know each other. Oh, yeah. So then,
Dr. Rao will do that very nicely.
No, well, Dr. Tarai is well known because he has already delivered two, 3 lectures in the philosophy family, and he is a known man. And I think the members who are attending today, well, they know him well. Professor Tarai, he is in Ravensa University. Prior to that, he was in GM University. He is a very good scholar, and whenever he comes with a lot of purpose. And whenever he presents with lot of technicalities involved. He is not a plain man. He doesn't take issues so plainly, so neatly. He takes issues critically. So, and also critically and technically. And that's how sometimes it becomes difficult also to understand him. And if I say I have properly understood Dr. Tarai, would be a wrong supposition again, because his papers are very technical. Unless and until we have a technical way of understanding him, we cannot really touch him to really say that we have understood him, because he speaks technically. So that's how I like him, because he doesn't take things superficially. He gets too much involved in whatever he does. Well, so that's how I know Dr. Tarai, and I should thank him, because everybody cannot do this. If somebody asks me, I am a very plain man. Okay, I'm not that technical, but Tarai is. So that's how I see a technical person in Tarai, and that's how I appreciate him to his office.
Dr.
Okay.
Rao,
Huh, huh.
exactly I described his personality, what you said.
Because that is the
How two minds match?
because that is his true nature. Because we are not speaking anything wrong. Because
So,
whenever he
so here value is objective. Thank you, thank you.
okay, anyway, so I should thank Dr. Tarai for his talk. Well, I should say that I missed his lecture. Well, I will go through the YouTube and find things to really understand him. Well, I should thank him for accepting the invitation of Philosophy
Yeah.
Family and
Can I
delivering
just
lecture.
can I just say
Yes,
one thing? Yeah,
yes, yes, yes.
actually, the presentation that I made, it is based on a paper that I wrote in 2020. So the paper is available online, in fact. So the paper's name is called Invisibility of Value. It is basically, I'm trying to counter Billigrami, but later on I realized that Billigrami is having a better position than mine. So it is basically a kind of evolution that I'm having philosophically. So yeah, if you're interested, you can see that paper. Yeah. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Okay, okay. Thank you again for this information. Thank you. Okay, thank you. So it's another information where we'll go look into this paper and also your talk to really understand you. And thank you so much for being with us and delivering a nice lecture. I should thank Alok Tendon sir and for his observations, because his observations really help us to take the discussions further. And I also thank Ranjit Ghosh sir, because Ranjit Ghosh sir and Alok Tendon sir, they show a way to carry on the discussion. And even today, even Pramod Das sir, he took his stand and actively involved in the discussion. So I also thank Srinivasan sir for his questions and observations. And I thank everybody connected with this webinar for making this webinar so successful. So thanking everybody. I should request Dr. Tarai for finding some time for another good lecture, a technical one again. So that's how we are learning, sir. So that we can learn from you that how things can be really put into
No,
say
no.
now really
You
learning.
are being, yeah, you are being so modest, sir. I know you. You are being so modest here.
But we enjoy, sir. Anyway, thank you, Professor Tarai, for your paper, for your presentation, and I thank everybody for being connected with us. So with these words, if I am not thanking anybody, let me see. Well, I say I thank everybody for making this evening so good. So with these words, I request Dr. Tarai for preparing for another presentation in this forum. And with these words, let us move to Professor Das for declaring this meeting closed. Thank you so
Yes,
much.
yes, yes,
Thank
sir,
you.
yes,
Thank you.
sir. With this meeting is declared closed. Thank you all. Grateful to all. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you.